Unless you've been living under a rock for the last year or so, or you're just not that into interacting with the Dead by Daylight community, you may have heard the term Dash-Slop being thrown around like a baseball at a Yankees game. I mean, I personally can't go anywhere online without seeing the mention of the term or someone complaining about killers they think fit into that category. It's like an epidemic that's spreading faster and faster as time goes on. For a lot of you, I'm sure you're more than familiar with the term and how it's currently being used to complain about a large chunk of killers in the game. It came seemingly out of nowhere and overnight took over Dead by Daylight, and is now the easiest way to grovel and groan about a group of killers without making any actual arguments. Did he just say that? Oh yes, I did. Regardless, these complaints are not falling on deaf ears, and today I want to take a real good look at the term to understand what it means, why people are complaining about it, and how exactly it became a problem in the first place. Which, I mean, trying to get a concise understanding of the community's thoughts on something is like trying to find a needle in a haystack, but I never said I didn't like a challenge. Otherwise, I wouldn't play Dead by Daylight, right? Regardless, everybody buckle in. Today, we're going to take a deep look at the term Dash-Slop and try to understand the obsession that behavior seems to have with killers that fit the archetype, and more importantly, why people are beginning to complain about this in droves. Whenever I see someone complain about Dash-Slop, I also rarely see them actually define what it is from a fundamental level. There are killers that obviously have what you can call dashes. Wesker, Kaneki, Blight, and Billy are really easy examples of killers with dash abilities, and for them, the definition of the term is pretty obvious. They have powers that help them move quickly in a defined direction, therefore they have dashes, and it doesn't even seem to matter the amount of dashes in question in terms of this definition. The Hillbilly has one dash that lasts forever unless you hit a survivor or object, and Blight has several dashes that all have a set amount of time before they end. But they're both dash killers at their core. The same goes for Kaneki and Wesker, and obviously there are more killers that have those abilities than the four I mentioned, such as Chucky, Demogorgon, Oni, technically the twins, specifically Victor's Pounce. You see, this is where I start having a big problem with defining this term. Let's say we use Pixelbush's definition of a dash, which as he states it is a movement ability that causes the killer to travel across the map in a fixed/semi-fixed direction, and a dash killer is one that has a large chunk of their power dedicated to that dash. Okay, that makes sense. I think we can all agree that the definition he used it defines it pretty well. However, there are some killers that don't fit perfectly into that category and find themselves in the odd middle ground. Let's start with Nurse. She has multiple blinks that allow her to travel forward, and using those blinks allow you to injure survivors if you lunge during them. But I guarantee most people don't even think about her when talking about dash killers. What about the Houndmaster? She sends out her dog to catch survivors, which we can all agree is more of a ranged attack, but she can then control the dog directly to give it a second dash forward. Is she not a dash killer because she isn't directly moving? I don't know, her dog definitely does, and you are controlling the dog. Is it just a ranged attack that you can control more? I don't exactly know. Like I said, it's a weird middle ground, and your definition of the term will determine whether or not you consider her a dash killer. In Pixel's own video, he considers Houndmaster a dash killer, but by his own definition, that doesn't really work. The Houndmaster isn't traveling across the map in any way. In fact, she isn't moving at all. If his definition is an ability that causes the killer to travel across the map, then wouldn't Houndmaster not really fit into that category? And if she does Pinhead also fit into that category because he controls his chains? It's basically the same power as Houndmaster's technically. Not to throw any shade at the guy, obviously, I love his stuff, but this is what makes it such a complicated term. For another example, do Bubba's chainsaw sweeps not count because he has full control over his movements despite the fact that he gets faster and has a pretty sensitive hitbox? Does he count less than Pig does despite the fact that Pig has full control over her movements when using her ambush attack? She certainly doesn't have a hitbox to worry about while ambushing. What about the new Myers changes? People are so quick to call him Dash-Slop despite the fact that the patch notes directly call his new attack a lunge. Are killers with longer lunges also Dash-Slop now too? Sadako gets a longer lunge when teleporting to a TV, so does that mean she's Dash-Slop? The Legion has a longer lunge when in Feral Frenzy. Are they Dash-Slop? What about Wraith? You see, this is the problem. The term Dash-Slop has become so overused that no one actually knows what it means. It's like calling something woke. Oh, this is something I don't like. Let me slap on a term that means absolutely nothing to farm internet points. That's how it comes across to me. Generalizations, specifically for Dead by Daylight, are an incredibly risky thing to do. That's why I was so hyped to see that Behavior was making specific balance changes to stronger killers in this upcoming patch. Give all the killers the same things, and something that's strong for the weaker killers will be god tier for the strongest killers, and then if Behavior nerfs the strong things because of the strongest killers, all of a sudden the weaker killers don't have that leg up that they need anymore. It's a non-stop issue. The same thing happens when calling something Dash-Slop. You can't just slap on that term to every little thing and expect it to mean anything. That's just not how it works, and you're gonna make an ass out of yourself if you do that. That being said, to make this video work, I'm gonna need to define what dashes are from my perspective. It's a way we can all be on the same page here. So let me try to do that real quick. I'd say for the most part, I do agree with Pixel's definition of what a dash is. A movement ability that causes the killer to travel across the map in a specific direction. Like I said, as for defining dashes, it works. To further expand on that, lunges should never count as dashes, because by that logic, throwing on Q or playing any killer who can get a longer lunge counts as having a dash, which really muddies the water with what we're trying to define here. The dash in question also needs to have some sort of limited movement, otherwise you're just moving faster, and that isn't a dash in my eyes. I also agree that the killer has to be physically moving across the map for it to count as a dash, otherwise killers like Houndmaster, Pinhead, even the Knight, technically fit into that category. However, where I disagree with Pixel is that I would only consider a killer to be a dash killer if their dash can be directly used to injure or down survivors. So, by that logic, Billy, Demogorgon, Oni, Blight, Twins, Wesker, Chucky, Dracula, and Kaneki are all dash killers. Pig and Bubba fit into a weird category. While they both have things you could consider to be dashes, they have full control over their movements while doing so, and it's really up to you whether or not you'd consider that to be a dash or just a fancy lunge. This is based on what we've seen where Myers is gonna fall too. Expanded on this even more, Vecna may have a movement ability, but he can't use it to injure or down survivors, so by that logic, I don't consider him a dash killer. Houndmaster can send out her dog and then control said dog, but that only serves to limit the survivor's movement unless they're vaulting a window, so I wouldn't really consider her to be a dash killer, and if I did, Pinhead would be one too, and that really wouldn't make any sense. To be completely honest, I don't like doing this, putting killers in a specific category based on their power. It creates a lot of whataboutism that makes it really hard to argue a point. I could sit here giving you the definition of what I think counts as a dash killer, and you could say, well, what about this? Is this a dash killer? Have you considered this point? And maybe you could get me to change my mind. It opens up too many branching paths for different interpretations. It's like playing a Quantic Dream game. This is why I think the term Dash-Slop is so stupid. That being said, why are people complaining about this so much, and why are they using this term? It's become such a talking point because people believe that Behavior has been adding killers lately that all seem to have an ability that feels like a dash. Dracula, Houndmaster, and Kaneki all have abilities that on the surface level might seem similar to go against, with Springtrap being the killer that finally broke the mold by having a ranged attack. To that I say, what? You're gonna look me in the eye and say that going against Kaneki feels the same as going against Houndmaster because they both have dashes? You're gonna tell me that going against Chucky and going against Vecna are both similar experiences just because they have that ability? On what planet? That's the biggest malarkey I've ever heard. And before someone says, oh, Skrump, you're generalizing too much, is that not what using the term Dash-Slop for these killers is doing? Well, it's true that killers these days tend to come out with a movement ability. That doesn't mean they're similar whatsoever, and I really don't understand how people see it that way. The fact that people are even complaining about this would imply they want killers with different types of powers instead of only getting killers that rely on movement abilities that are close enough in design that you can group them all together, make up a term that makes no sense, and post it on Twitter for likes. But as we all know, people don't want that. Despite what they'd have you believe, the complaints about Dash-Slop are about as hollow as a jack-o'-lantern, and while those complaints might make you think that they want different types of killers, I promise they don't. Just for an example, let's say Behavior releases the next killer and they don't have a dash power. Instead, they have a stealth ability and they need to rely on macro play in order to win, instead of solely relying on quick chases and mini hooks. What do you think would happen? Because I already know. People would bitch and moan while complaining about the killer and claiming the chapter was a failure because the killer isn't fun to go against or play as. That's what would happen, because it happens every time Behavior doesn't make a chase killer. Trapper, Hag, Twins, Sadako, Knight, Skull Merchant, Singularity, 7 of the most hated killers in the entire game. What do they have in common? Counterplay that doesn't entirely involve doing well in chase, because their powers aren't designed that way. I'm not gonna buy into the idea that people are out here begging for a different type of killer when I know damn well they aren't gonna play a less chase-based killer. If Behavior did release another macro killer, we all know it would drop so hard in pick rate that people would make videos about the worst chapter in D&D history because people aren't picking that killer over the more exciting ones. The fact of the matter is that people prefer playing killers that have chase abilities. Out of the 5 most played killers right now, 3 of them are dash killers and 2 of them are ranged killers. The community has made it clear that they like chase-oriented killers, and that's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with those killers. In fact, they tend to be the most fun to play because they're simple and easy to understand. If you're winning chases pretty quickly, you're gonna win. You don't need to worry about the bigger picture because in your eyes, the picture is condensed to what's right in front of you. You don't need to worry about what Michaela is doing across the map. You just need to worry about downing Steve in a reasonable amount of time. If you are worried about macro play, just throw on Pain Resonance and Dead Man Switch. As long as you're getting your hooks, you'll probably win, and if not, it's probably the map that's the problem. This is not a behavior creativity problem. It's the community shitting on any type of killer that isn't non-stop action. Behavior looks at their statistics and sees that people love playing Wesker, so much so that it fucks with queue times, and they're pushed in the direction of adding more killers like Wesker, more killers like Springtrap, more killers that just need to focus on making sure they're handling chases well. If people truly want a larger variety of killers, they need to stop complaining about chase killers and instead play the more macro-based ones. But I know that's not going to happen. The dedicated DBD players care too much about winning to try killers that are harder, and the newer players are just going to choose the killers that they think are fun, which will be killers like Kaneki and Wesker. And there's nothing wrong with that, but people making up outrage about getting similar killers when they only ever play those killers will give behavior the wrong idea about what people like. And if they ever make a killer that isn't chase-based, well, we know what's going to happen. Behavior will get flack for it, and we'll be back to square one. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Simply put, it's incredibly hard for behavior to design killers with a more macro-based power and have them also be fun. For survivors, a lot of the fun is, okay, how am I going to beat this guy in a chase? How am I going to last as long as possible? Not like, how am I going to stop this guy from getting a 3-gen as soon as the match starts? Because that's just a lot more complicated and less engaging. For players like me, I have a guilty pleasure in trying to break 3-gens, but I know I can't rely on my solo queue teammates to be smart when it comes to macro play, so I end up just dying super early and it ruins the fun. It's like going against with a solo queue team. It's just an absolutely miserable experience because no one can communicate properly, and you can't have more macro-based killers without that communication. If you're in a Survive with Friends team, it's fun because you get to talk and you get to make plans of how you're gonna break a 3-gen or, stop a killer from getting a ton of pressure. But solo queue teammates just don't have that communication, and they probably never will. And that's why macro-based killers are going to always be sort of the black sheep of the Dead by Daylight roster. Again, the Dead by Daylight community has made it clear that we like the chase-oriented killers more because there's non-stop complaining when the killer is any other way. But I do want to know what you guys think. What do you think defines a dash killer? What do you think about the term Dash-Slop? Do you think it's annoying and regressive like I do, or do you use it all the time because it's funny? That's honestly pretty based. But that's it for me, gamers. Have a great day.